Hello, it's Leah. Welcome to the channel. Happy Pride Month! Because it's Pride Month, I wanted to celebrate some queer influencers today who are putting stuff out into the world that I think is really awesome. So this is a list of my 6 favorite fat queer influencers for you to be able to follow along or maybe grab their book or what have you. So let me start with number 1. The first queer fat person that I want to highlight in today's special Pride video is Roxane Gay. She gets the number 1 spot because I think she sort of started with this sort of fat acceptance, feminist sort of framework earlier than a lot of the other folks on this list, just because she's a little bit older than us. And she's been a complete legend. She put out this very well-known book some time ago called Bad Feminist. And so she's very widely known. She's super talented and her writing is really accessible and really lovely. And I just wanted to make sure that we're highlighting her as this like sort of woman who has paved the way for a lot of the other fat acceptance people who are doing stuff, putting out media, creating books, who are influencers and creating representation on social media and so on. Roxane Gay is a must in my view if you're going to be following someone on Instagram, for example, or looking for some great books to read. Roxane's a really great starting point, and you can follow her on Instagram at RoxaneGay74. The second person I want to highlight today in our special Pride video is Jessamyn Stanley. So Jessamyn is a queer fat yoga instructor who spends a lot of time just showing a fat body doing yoga. And so this is a really good option for somebody if you're kind of into like the yoga scene, or if you're into like sort of fitness and stuff, but you still want to be able to see bodies that look a little bit more like yours, or if you want just more inclusive content around that stuff. Jessamyn's a really, really great option. You can follow her at my name is Jessamyn on Instagram, and there's tons and tons of videos, not just about yoga, but like she's quite funny and she'll like talk about like weird things that happen in class, and she'll just sort of like share her experiences. She'll talk about like, she has really great recipes and stuff. So anyway, she's a really great follow as well. I would really recommend it if you're into sort of like the health and fitness and like all that sort of stuff. She's a really, really great option as well. The third person I want to highlight in this special Pride episode is Dr. Larmie, who runs something called the Fat Doctor podcast. Dr. Larmie is a trans non-binary doctor in the United Kingdom who puts this podcast together called the Fat Doctor podcast, where they talk about sort of issues that affect fat people, how medical treatment is affected by fat bias, things like that. It's really, really informative. It's very much from a medical's perspective. So because they have worked as a doctor for so long, and because they also have a fat body, they have this really wonderful sort of dual vision of like the experience of a patient, but also how doctors approach things. And so it creates this really informative educational content around fat bias, around the ways that doctors talk about fatness, around the actual medicine and biology of how certain like medical conditions actually work and why we connect them to fatness and how that can be kind of skewed. So I find the podcast incredibly informative. They also have amazing guests. They have like some of the people who are on this list have like been on their podcast and stuff. So like they have really, really amazing guests as well. So I really, really recommend checking out the Fat Doctor podcast, and you can follow Dr. Larmie at the Fat Doctor podcast on Instagram for updates on the podcast and anything else that they choose to post there. The fourth person I want to highlight today is someone who I've actually kind of already mentioned on the channel a couple of times, but it's Aubrey Gordon, who is someone I just absolutely love, who does the Maintenance Phase podcast with Michael Hobbs. And she is so smart and so like research oriented and super into like all of the methodology and the data and like all that stuff. And like, I feel like a little bit less of a weirdo for being kind of a nerd when I listen to her, but she is super, super great for looking at what research actually tells us and being able to parse through all the data and say like, does it tell us this? Can we actually draw this conclusion from this information and those sorts of things? She's really great at looking at like, wait a minute, but you're saying that, but this other thing could also explain that. Like, she's just really, really smart. She has this great mind for like data. And I really, really love her podcast, which I already shouted out on another episode, called Maintenance Phase. And it's just like one of my favorite podcasts. And they debunk a ton of issues around like fatness, around like sort of fad diets and like misconceptions about bodies and things like that. It's one of my favorite podcasts ever. And so she's like a huge driving force behind that podcast. I'm just a huge fan of Aubrey Gordon. I've also got like her book recently and I started reading that, and it's just like one of the most validating things I've ever read in my life. So I cannot recommend enough following Aubrey's work. You can get her first book, which is called What We Don't Talk About When We Talk About Fat. And there's also a second book, which is called You Just Need to Lose Weight and 19 Other Myths About Fatness. It's like pretty new, I want to say in the past year or so, and I haven't got that one yet. It's on order. You can follow her also on Instagram at Your Fat Friend. And she posts about, because she was recently featured in a documentary and stuff like that. So like she's doing all sorts of really interesting work. And I totally fangirl for her, honestly. Like I think she's just the coolest person. The fifth person I want to shout out in this special Pride episode is Lindy West. Lindy West is kind of an OG person who I got into sort of the fat acceptance movement with some years ago. So she was writing, I think, for Jezebel at the time, but she's a writer and she wrote a really well-known book actually called Shrill, which they made into a TV series. The TV series was really great too. And one of the things I really love about Lindy is that she loves to put stuff out into the world that's just like silly and fun. And like, 'cause she is kind of a comedian-ish. She has a podcast with her best friend called Text Me Back, where they kind of just talk about like funny stuff that happened to them and stuff. And it's really lovely because it's one of those options for you to listen to where like, you know that you're not going to just be going along enjoying yourself and then they drop like some kind of like fat phobic nonsense, because both of them are very like fat accepting, but also they're just like talking about silly things that their dog did or something. So like if you're not feeling like some kind of really like deep philosophical, like political, whatever, like you can kind of unplug and also listen to them, knowing that like it's not going to have all this like weird content that's going to like set off your eating disorder or something. They do a really great job with that podcast. Megan and Lindy are really funny together because they're best friends and have been for a long time. And it's called Text Me Back, the podcast. If you want to check out Shrill, I really recommend it. It's a great book. You can follow Lindy at the Lindy West on Instagram. Yeah, she isn't like, I don't think she posts a ton on Instagram, but I really recommend checking out like her podcast, checking out her book, stuff like that, because she's putting lots of really great stuff out. You might not get that much mileage on her actual social media accounts. And last but not least, the sixth person I want to highlight on this special Pride episode is Ragen Chastain, who was the first person who got me really into fat acceptance around like sort of medical stuff. And she was probably, oh gosh, for like 20 years now, maybe close. She started this blog called Dances with Fat. She was a dance instructor at the time, or at least an avid dancer. I can't remember, but I think she was teaching dance as well. And she was really like interested in sort of the science and the medicine around fatness. And she was really instrumental in me understanding sort of like the weirdness in the consult room when I went in to see the doctor and stuff, and just sort of understanding like why my doctor's visits were weird, understanding like why the stuff my doctor was saying about my body didn't really match with like what I knew to be true about my body. This sort of like weird, like not believing me and stuff like that. I sort of was like, what's going on here, you know? And Ragen really helped me to understand those things. She had these really amazing sort of cheat sheets on her website where you could like look up how to like make a doctor's visit go a little bit better, or like, you know, all these different like bits of advice on like how to deal with these different things. And she's really into, kind of like Aubrey Gordon actually, really into like a lot of the medicine and the data and the really the research side of things. And so she works with a lot of different organizations and stuff to try to improve the way that fat people are treated during, you know, medical visits and things like that. And so she's doing a lot of really amazing work. Dances with Fat is still up. There's lots of really interesting information there, but it also links to the other projects that she's working on. So I really, really recommend checking out Ragen Chastain, because she's kind of one of the like OG, I would definitely fangirl if like she ever like wrote me an email or something. So that has been my top 6 queer fat people who are putting media out into the world, whether it's social media, sort of being an influencer, whether it is books, whether it is blogs, whether it is podcasts, whatever it might be. These are 6 of the great queer fat people who are, I think, making the world a better place by making contributions that we can enjoy as consumers and as listeners and watchers and so on. I really appreciate sort of the way that they have kind of boosted the information that's available to us, because I think as fat people, a lot of the time the information is pretty superficial. A lot of it is really like misinformed. And the more that these folks are putting out into the world, the more we actually are able to understand ourselves. It reminds me almost like how like gynecology for the longest time it was just kind of a mystery because we didn't think it was worthwhile to study women. There is sort of a sense of that with fat people where they're like, oh, well, who cares about fat people? But like there is data out there, and these folks are really great at like sort of putting information out there, helping us to understand the world as fat people, helping us to feel better in our bodies, you know, being able to see on social media all of these images of fat people doing everyday things and stuff is like really positive for a fat person, and it helps to kind of validate you and make you feel not so alone. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you found this interesting. If you did, please give this video a like, and you can hit the little bell and subscribe to get notifications when I upload, which is every week on Wednesdays. Thank you so much again, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Bye-bye for now.